What happens when one of America's most respected broadcasters decides he's done playing nice with the royal drama? What happens when a duchess expecting soft questions gets hit with raw, uncomfortable truth, live and unscripted? Today, we break down the moment Michael Strahan held Meghan Markle accountable like never before. Trust me, this is the kind of clash that rewrites public perception. If you're tired of PR spin and want real talk, hit that subscribe button now, because it's about to get intense. It was a typical bright morning on Good Morning America. The lights were soft, the set was polished, and the coffee was hot. Everything looked like it always did. Familiar, friendly, safe. Meghan Markle walked in like she had done a dozen times before. Confident, smiling, dressed like royalty even without the crown. The producers moved around her like clockwork. The camera crew was ready. This was just another stop on her press tour. Another carefully crafted moment in front of a camera. Another chance to control the story. The audience watching from home had expectations. They thought they knew how this would go. A few warm questions, a few laughs. Maybe a moment of vulnerability, but all wrapped up neatly in a package of good vibes and morning charm. And sitting across from her, waiting with that signature smile, was Michael Strahan, former NFL star, TV favorite, the man who always played it cool, always stayed in the middle lane, never too hot, never too cold. But something felt different this time. In the days leading up to this moment, there had been whispers, subtle shifts in Michael's tone during past interviews, little cracks showing a certain look in his eyes when a guest gave a polished, rehearsed answer, as if he had grown tired of the same old dance, as if he wanted to say more, ask more, go deeper. And this morning, those cracks were no longer subtle. The music rolled, the GMA logo faded, the camera cut to Michael and Meghan at the desk. The small talk started. The smiles were wide, but underneath it all, the tension was there. You could feel it even through the screen. Michael leaned forward slightly. Meghan's smile stiffened just a bit, and somewhere between her rehearsed words and his unblinking stare, the whole atmosphere shifted. This was not going to be the interview anyone expected, and for the first time in a long time, it looked like someone on live TV was about to break the script. This was not just another friendly morning chat. This was the moment. Everything started to change, and it was all happening live. Right in front of America. Right in front of us. This was not going to be just another interview. The cameras were rolling. The studio lights gave everything a warm, familiar glow. It looked like any other Good Morning America segment. A-list guest, polished host, coffee mugs, and scripted smiles. On the surface, it was business as usual. But it only took a few minutes for things to feel different. Meghan Markle was back on the media circuit. Her team had lined up this appearance like any other. Talk about her new projects, drop a few safe lines about motherhood. Maybe mention her podcast or a charity close to her heart. The usual playbook. Keep it light. Keep it controlled. She walked onto the set with that same polished grace the world has seen 100 times before. The makeup flawless, the outfit clean and calculated, and the smile bright, but just guarded enough to remind you she has been through the fire. Michael Strahan sat across from her, friendly, as always. But if you had been watching him closely over the last few months, you would have noticed something building. A shift in his tone. A little more edge. A little less patience for prepackaged answers. So when he leaned in and asked his first real question, you could feel the air change. He started soft, complimenting her work and easing into the topic. But then he pivoted. You have said in interviews that the media invaded your life, that it was too much. But at the same time, you are everywhere. Streaming platforms, podcasts, magazine covers. So when you say the media was intrusive, do you mean they were just not telling the story you wanted told? The studio went quiet for half a beat. Meghan blinked. That smile, still on her face, flickered just a little. Not gone, but definitely. Cracked. Her jaw shifted. Her posture stiffened. It was not a rude question. It was calm, even respectful. But it cut straight to the core. Because what Michael had done was call out something most people tiptoe around. He took the public image, the victim of media, and held it up next to the reality, the woman who actively engages with that same media when it suits her. That contradiction was now on full display, live on national television. Meghan took a breath and leaned in, trying to regain control. But something had already shifted. The safe zone was gone. The walls she had built through years of carefully managed PR were no longer holding, and the viewers at home, they felt it. That ripple, that tension, something was brewing. If you are watching this and think Michael just asked what no one else dared to, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dive breakdowns like this. We are just getting started. Michael leaned in a little. He kept his voice calm, but there was weight behind every word. You could feel it. The whole room felt it. He looked right at Meghan and said, "Let us talk about authenticity for a second." Meghan blinked, just once, but it was enough to catch you. Have spoken a lot about wanting privacy. Michael continued. But then you sit down with Oprah. You do a Netflix series, Spotify deals, and a podcast where you tell the world your story on your terms. Meghan tried to smile, but it did not quite land. Yes, because I am sharing my truth. That is very different from being exposed or exploited. Michael nodded slowly, then asked, or are you protecting your image? That landed hard. For a full second, no one said anything. No cough, no laugh, not even a shuffle from the crew. Just silence. You could see Meghan shift. Her shoulders tightened. Her fingers clasped more tightly around the armrest. She looked like someone trying to stay calm while waves crashed around her. She tried to bring it back. When people twist your words, when they weaponize your silence, you reach a point where you have to speak. Michael replied, steady as ever, but only when you are in control of the mic, the camera, the narrative. Meghan's lips pressed into a thin line. He was not yelling. He was not being rude, but he was doing what very few people in media ever do. He was cutting through the brand, the PR, the carefully rehearsed lines, and he was asking the questions. Millions had been thinking, but no one had dared to ask. Meghan finally said, what would you do if people were saying things about your family that were not true? Michael looked at her and said, I would correct the record, but I would not try to rewrite the whole book. Another pause. This time, Meghan looked down, just for a second. Her face was still composed, but the shine had dimmed a little. The energy was shifting. Michael had touched the nerve. Not because he was mean, but because he was honest. And honesty, in a room full of performance, can feel like a spotlight. If you are watching this and thinking Michael just asked what no one else dared to, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dive breakdowns like this. We are just getting started. Michael shifted in his seat, glanced at the audience, and looked right back at Meghan. His tone dropped a little, not sharp, but firm, almost like a warning wrapped in curiosity. 17 staff members, he said, pausing just long enough for it to land. That is how many people resigned or were reassigned during your time with the royal family. That number is out there. The studio grew still again. No camera clicks, no shuffling papers. Just that quiet tension that wraps around a moment. Like plastic. Meghan blinked, keeping her composure, but her body stiffened just slightly. Her smile faltered for a second before it returned. I am not here to respond to tabloid gossip, she said. Her voice was calm, but her tone carried weight. We know how the press works. Anything to sell a headline. Michael leaned forward a little. Not aggressive, not confrontational. Just enough to signal that he was not backing away from this one. But it was not just the tabloids. He said, the palace launched an internal investigation. That is not just a rumor. That is a real process. That is not nothing. Meghan's eyes narrowed just a touch. She drew in a breath, clearly searching for the right words. Look, she said, when you step into that world, things happen behind closed doors that the public will never understand. I tried to bring compassion to that role. I tried to create change from within. But change scares people. Michael nodded slowly, almost respectfully. I understand that, he said. But these were not policy disagreements. These were personal. These were people saying they felt bullied, that they felt silenced, that they had to leave. Meghan shifted in her seat. Her hands, which had been neatly folded on her lap, started to move more. She touched her bracelet, looked down, looked up again. I know who I am, she said finally, and I know the intention I brought into every room. That story, it has been twisted over and over again. I refuse to carry blame for things I did not do. Michael let the silence stretch for a second, letting the words breathe. But do you understand why people struggled to speak up in that space? He asked. Why so many chose to walk away rather than stay? Meghan's mouth opened, then closed again. She seemed caught between defending herself and avoiding the trap of sounding defensive. The tension was thick now. Not explosive, just heavy, a slow build. A moment where truth and image collided under bright studio lights. Everyone was watching, waiting, wondering what would come next. Michael sat forward in his chair, lowering his voice just enough to signal a shift in tone. Meghan, back in the Oprah interview, you said you had suicidal thoughts while living as a royal, that you felt completely alone. The room changed. The air tightened. Even the camera operators seemed to hold still. Meghan nodded slowly. Her expression was careful, but her eyes seemed to search for steady ground. Michael continued, respectfully at first. Mental health is serious. No one is denying that. And if you felt that way, that is tragic. No one should ever feel so alone. There was a pause, a respectful one. Then Michael leaned in, not aggressively, but with intent. But you had Oprah's number. You had elite legal teams. You had a world-class PR staff. Your mother was in touch. You had staff, security, global access. He looked straight at her. So, was there truly no one to turn to? Or is that how the story was told to fit a bigger narrative? Meghan's eyes flickered. Her lips parted, but for a moment, no sound came out. Then she exhaled and spoke. That is cruel. You are being incredibly insensitive. Michael, you do not know what I felt. You do not know the isolation inside that palace. Michael did not flinch. I am not questioning your pain. I am questioning the framing. The public was told there was no one, but were you truly isolated, or were you silenced in a different way? Meghan shook her head. This is why people stay silent, because when they speak, they get blamed, doubted, picked apart on national television. The audience was split. Some leaned toward sympathy, others toward skepticism. The tension was raw. Michael took a breath. Meghan, I understand the weight of those feelings, but when your story is used to sway millions, the details matter. All of them, not just the ones that make headlines. Meghan's face dropped. Not angry now, just worn. He softened his voice. You have every right to speak your truth, but people also have a right to ask questions, especially when the truth shapes how the world sees people, countries, even families. It was the most difficult part of the interview. Not because of shouting or chaos, but because of the silence that followed. The kind of silence that comes when a hard truth gets held up against a painful one and both feel real. The room sat with that, and so did everyone watching. Michael leaned back in his chair and looked directly at Meghan. His tone was steady, but the weight behind his words was unmistakable. Let me get this straight, he began. You were welcomed into a family that gave you worldwide attention, security, a palace, the ability to speak to the world anytime you wanted. You had the support of a prince, a royal platform, and the eyes of millions. Meghan nodded slightly, her face unreadable. But somehow, Michael continued. Every time you had that platform, it became less about duty and more about damage. The air in the studio grew heavy. You could feel it through the screen. This was no longer a friendly chat. This was a reckoning. Meghan took a breath and said, it was never about privilege, it was about pain. The press attacks, the loneliness, the judgment that was real. Michael paused. He let her words sit for a moment. Then he leaned in. I am not denying that you felt pain, he said. But pain is not the full story, is it? Because while you say you were suffering, you were also negotiating Netflix deals, writing books, booking interviews, launching brands. His tone was not mocking. It was sharp, focused, controlled. You leveraged that pain, turned it into a product, into profit. Meghan's jaw tightened. Michael pressed forward. You talk about being stripped of your titles, but you still use Duchess on every introduction, on every book cover, on every appearance. You keep one foot in the palace and the other on the podcast circuit. He looked at her with a mix of frustration and disbelief. You say you were silenced, but you have not stopped speaking since. You said you wanted privacy, yet you invited the cameras in. Meghan tried to cut in, but Michael kept going. It feels like you want all the benefits of royalty, without any of the responsibility. Having your cake and eating it too. The phrase landed like a punch. She looked stunned, not angry, not defensive, just shaken. Like she had not expected him to go there. Not on national television. Michael's voice softened, but his words did not. Look, we all make mistakes. We all have blind spots, but I have to ask you this. Meghan, where is your moment of reflection? Silence. You talk about how others treated you, how the institution failed you. But where is the part where you ask, what could I have done differently? What role did I play? That was it. The emotional peak. Meghan blinked fast. Her hands were tight in her lap. For the first time, she looked like she had no script, no line prepared. Just raw silence. The camera stayed on her for a beat too long. Long enough for everyone watching to feel it. And in that moment, it was not about royalty or interviews. It was about two people, one asking the questions, the other facing the truth. And it hit harder than anyone expected. Meghan reached for her mic. Her hand was shaking, but she tried to hide it. With one firm motion, she unclipped it from her dress. That little pop of static from the mic was barely audible, but the meaning was deafening. She was done, ready to leave. The studio went silent. Michael leaned forward, his voice calm but sharper than before. That is your pattern, Meghan. You walk away when it gets hard. His words hit the air like a hammer. You walked away from your father when he spoke to the press. You walked away from your sister when she asked questions. You walked away from royal staff when they pushed back. You walked away from the entire royal family. Meghan paused. She did not argue. She did not defend herself. She just stared at him. For once, the carefully measured words were gone. The confidence faded. The silence stretched. Then, she stood up and turned toward the exit. No goodbye, no final word, just her back facing the audience as she walked off set. The crew stood frozen. No one moved, no one breathed. It was not just a walkout, it was a moment, and in that moment, everyone in that room realized something had just shifted forever. Michael turned back to the camera. The room was still tense, but his voice came steady. That is what real journalism looks like. It is not about cruelty. It is about accountability. You cannot keep saying you want your truth to be heard, but never want to answer for the damage it causes. That is not fair to the people watching, and it is not fair to the ones caught in the crossfire. He paused just long enough for the weight of his words to settle. This show is not about making people look bad. It is about holding a mirror up to the choices they make. Meghan was given a chance to speak. But when the questions got real, she walked out. That says more than any headline ever could. At that moment, the camera zoomed in slightly, catching the fire still lingering in his eyes. You could tell he did not enjoy the confrontation, but he knew it was necessary. Outside the studio, the world was already reacting. Clips from the interview were flooding social media. Comment sections were blowing up. Every major outlet was running the story. People were split, arguing over who was right and who was wrong. But one thing was clear. This was no ordinary morning show moment. This was a cultural flashpoint. Now, let me ask you, did Michael go too far? Or was this the kind of honesty we have been missing in celebrity interviews? We want to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe the truth deserves a spotlight, no matter how uncomfortable it gets, then hit that subscribe button. Because on this channel, we do not shy away from tough questions. We bring them front and center. Thanks for watching.